All right, I'm pretty thrilled. I've never had something blossom in the way it's going to blossom here. It took me a while to think about this, by the way, like 2 minutes. On this series. So, um, Richard Blossom, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Yeah, thanks. Good to be here.
I love the name. There's so many things you can do with that you probably have heard in your lifetime also with that name. But this is about leaders who care, and I'm excited that you're going to be able to show people that you are just that by what you've done and what the experiences you've had. And best way to start, as I always say, would be if you could share a little bit about who you are, where you're from originally, one of my favorite places where you are right now. A little bit maybe of family, if you feel comfortable sharing about that. Maybe something you've never told anybody you want to reveal to the world. Now that's always nice, but I always have to put an asterisk with men. Not your title or your company or business yet. We'll get to that, but who Richard is. So please share.
Okay. Well, I was born in Connecticut, but very close to New York, but in the woods, So I grew up in a small town with a lot of open forest. Um, I lived and worked in and around New York for the early part of my career, and I moved to Singapore in the late 80s, and I lived in Singapore almost 30 years.
Wow,
And I live in San Miguel, de Allende, Mexico now, which is about 3.5 hours north of Mexico City. It's a beautiful old sort of Spanish colonial town. Um,
it is.
and I have three daughters, so as you can imagine, the name Blossom works better for them.
Yeah, I bet.
Uh, it's a great name for girls to have. So I'm honored and blessed to have three great daughters and two grandsons. So I think the generations sort of split all girls, and now the next generation so far is all boys.
So, quick question there. With a great name like Blossom, did they change it when they got married?
Oh, they didn't.
Nice.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, in professional life, I guess once you become sort of like Annie Blossom, like my oldest daughter, Mina Blossom, Carissa Blossom, you want to keep that. So I think a lot of young women do that, but I think they've always liked the name. I guess if you hate your name, then maybe you'd be motivated to change it. But
Well, then it's easier to change it. If you love your name, it's like a discussion with your spouse at that point.
yeah,
Um, cool. Did you? What was I going to say? How did you pick San Miguel de Allende?
I was um, working on a project that where I was working with a manufacturer about half an hour distance from here, and I started going back and forth to see this company, and they said, I think it'd be good if you stay overnight, but there's no hotel here, but we can recommend San Miguel, and it's not that far away. So I started by accident, kind of staying in San Miguel. And more I spent time here, I was really struck by it. And my wife had been here also separately, and then we came here together for a vacation after I started working on these projects, and then kind of in the middle of COVID, we thought about it, and I got a email with a picture of this house. And I looked at this house and I said, I think we need to go there and see this. And so we did. We came and bought this house, oddly somehow some clever real estate person had, I don't know, struck the right chord with me. And so we bought this house. And then almost immediately after buying it, my wife said, you know, we could just live here. We bought it originally as a vacation house. And so it's a beautiful town. It's got a lot of interesting people, a lot of art and music and interesting life. And it's got a community, which I always thought I needed to live in a big city. And I think it was actually COVID that helped me realize that, you really don't. You just need to be someplace that has an airport somewhere nearby.
Yeah. No, I love San Miguel de Allende, and I have a friend who's there right now, actually, that was doing something with the Jewish crowd in San Miguel de Allende, apparently, and whatnot. But it was very welcoming and warm, and we had a great time there. Do a quick show, like you showed me the house. Can you do a quick show? Look at his style. It's gorgeous.
So you can see it's.
Man, who cleans up there?
I don't know if anybody's been all the way up there, but
One of those poles with the big, duster.
you need a pretty long pole.
Yeah, you definitely do. So you mentioned your daughters. What were you like as a kid, or even then a teenager? Teenager? Did you do summer jobs? Were you into sports, music, tech? What were you like?
Well, as I said, I grew up in the woods, kind of in this kind of small street that had like 7 houses on it, and then 1,000 acres of woods behind us.
Oh,
So my friends and I used to, love sort of exploring the woods with my dog and all that. I was into sports, particularly racket sports. So I, played tennis and, all that. I played sort of competitively and in college. And in the summers, like to go to the beach and, run around, do all that.
pick up girls.
Well, try, yes. And, I often think that I was fortunate that my parents gave me the freedom to work, but no allowance. So, um, yeah, from the time I was pretty young, I always was responsible for, if I wanted money, I could earn it, so
So were you the entrepreneur lemonade stand guy?
one of my best business ideas was selling my father's beer to the um, commuters that were coming from the train from New York. Uh, I think I didn't have a good sense of pricing, but I was acquiring it at a pretty low cost. But I had a paper route and mowed lawns, um, and then I think once I was, legally able to work, I got a job writing instruction manuals for scientific analytical instruments.
At what age?
18.
Holy cow. How did you know that?
Well, I met somebody that had a company nearby, and he had all these um, kind of brilliant uh, scientists that he'd hired post World War II. These German whatever
Yeah.
scientists who were designing all kinds of interesting instruments, but could barely speak English, and somebody had to write a manual so somebody could, like step one, turn it on, step.
Okay. That's pretty fascinating. Not every kid gets to do that. Geez, way, 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 way back, I was like delivering TV guides for one of the things I did. Those, remember, it was little TV guides
Yeah.
and stuff. I'm afraid to tell anybody what they cost back then. They're going to think I'm 102 years old if I tell them. Although well, I will say they sold for 15 cents. I feel almost caveman now. And there's a lady that gave me a 25-cent tip every week. And it was amazing. And she was so nice. And it'll go to some things we'll talk about later about people that make a difference in your life by small acts. That was one.
Well, 25 cents wasn't small in those days. So,
That's what, yeah, it's a small act, but it was a big act that I remembered and how kind it was. And especially 15 cents for a TV guide and you give me 25 cents. This is crazy. But she showed me appreciation of how to take care of her and whatnot. It's pretty cool. So then you got your bachelor's, you got your MBA, from, trying to remember, was it New York? In New
well, my
York,
MBA from New York University,
right?
I went to Colgate undergraduate.
Hmm. And what were you envisioning for yourself then, since you've already been writing technical manuals and and God knows what were you envisioning?
Well, much to my father's distress, I majored in English and creative writing. It was kind of going, you're going to starve. And I kind of always thought that, everything would work out. And actually, things usually do work out, but not the way maybe you think.
Right.
So I always assumed I would just get a job as a teacher. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't be able to, but I wasn't. And, I worked for 3 or 4 months trying to get a job in teaching. And then I finally said, well, I'm graduating. I have to do something. So I went into New York and went to Wall Street. That's where I thought the money was. And I went to the first bank um, at the top of Wall Street um, that I could sort of, find a personnel office, went in and it was Bankers Trust Company, which I don't think that even exists anymore. Um, it was purchased by Deutsche Bank, I think, but it was a banker's bank. It was like a wholesale bank. And I didn't realize I'd gone to the wrong personnel office that, for the sort of college people, you were supposed to go uptown, but I didn't know. So it turned out that the recruiter was overjoyed to see a college graduate. Mm, high school graduates, kind of day in, day out. So she gave me a job on the spot. And, so I was lucky in that. And then Bankers Trust, I didn't really like being a banker, but they offered to pay for my MBA.
Good offer.
So I took them up on that. And the moment I got my MBA, which I had started as a finance major, as you can imagine, for a bank, but along the way I changed my major, and I don't think they ever really noticed. I changed my major to marketing, and the day I got my MBA, I left Bankers Trust.
Well, I hope you thanked them for the opportunity. Now you worked, part of your amazing journey is you worked for some iconic companies, to say the least. Pepsi, Frito-Lay, which kind of is Pepsi, and Del Monte. And I've actually done some work for all of them too, from the search standpoint. Um, what did you what can you take from that? What did you learn from those working in those big companies? And were there any experiences or inflection points that really stand out, especially when you look back?
Well, I was very fortunate. My first job actually was at Kraft General Foods, um, and which at that time was kind of the premier marketing company in the U.S. Procter and Gamble later sort of
Hmm.
took over that role. So I was incredibly fortunate to get a job there, mainly because I played tennis. I played tennis with some guy who worked there and helped me get a job. But it was like going to business school all over again. It was a very conservative company. It was, very sort of theoretical. Um, so I kind of hung out there for the early part of my career, but then was sort of overjoyed to get somebody I had known there went to Pepsi and recruited me.
That's good.
And Pepsi was like night and day compared to General Foods. And yeah, it was great. I had a lot of freedom, and I was hired at that time to be the head of new product development for Pepsi. And I had tremendous freedom to do that. Then I became the head of brand marketing for Pepsi USA during the height of the Cola Wars, and started music marketing with Michael Jackson and Tina Turner and Gloria Estefan and all these people.
That's when you became really cool.
And one thing I always appreciated about Pepsi is they had a great human resource department. Actually, probably the most important staff function at Pepsi was HR. And the chairman saw his role as only two things. One was kind of external, government connections and sort of issues, like that. And the other was HR, and he spent like half his time with HR and had a pretty close relationship with all of the maybe type 100 guys at Pepsi.
Well, good for him.
So I think that was one of the things that always stayed with me is they tried to find the best people, give them a lot of freedom, a lot of challenging exercises and assignments. And all of the top people had mentors, sometimes more than one mentor. And I had a couple of amazing mentors at Pepsi. And one of them, after I'd been there almost 5 years, I think, then was, the head of marketing in the midst of the Cola Wars, all that stuff. He said, I think you're getting bored. And it, I had an amazing job and I wasn't really thinking about being bored, but it was like the third cycle of going through the national marketing, plans, and we'd already done a lot of cool things. He said, I think you should go to international. So I went. He hired me as his assistant, took me all over the world, gave me all kinds of interesting assignments like refranchising Pepsi in South Africa during the middle of apartheid, which
Wow.
was almost an impossible exercise. People were saying, I can buy Kodak for 50 cents on the dollar. Why should I take on Coke, for 100 cents on the dollar?
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard argument to.
What a great experience, though.
And then he took me on a trip to Asia, and the first place we stopped was Singapore. He goes, "Okay, this is where you're going to be." So I moved to Singapore and I became the head of Pepsi Asia Pacific.
I know. I noticed with Pepsi working with them for quite a bit. There was they were always pretty good at keeping people and finding opportunities for people to go different places. Now, if you couldn't go different places, it might have stifled your growth a little bit because they wanted you to go to different places. But what an opportunity to go different places and learn, which you're talking about right now. Um, did that evolve into Frito-Lay because that's owned by Pepsi?
Yeah, so I mean that's why I said they had an amazing human resource function, and not only were those people, powerful or influential, but they were astute and they had developed, like you were saying, a kind of a ethos that identified people with high potential and challenged them. And so that did involve moving them around, but giving them a lot of responsibility and a lot of freedom. And and see how they do. So, and then at some point it was like, if you want to be, running one of the companies, then you need to have experience in, the other divisions, et cetera. So that was all part of it, do your thing in marketing in the US, and we're going to move you to Asia, then we'll move you to Frito-Lay. And it was only when they wanted to move me back as the, global head of marketing that I
Back
left.
to New York, you mean?
And I got, I don't want to do that. I loved the freedom I'd had in Asia, and I didn't really having one of those, you know, top corporate jobs, and that was the problem. When you get down to that level, there's only, 10 jobs or something that you could have anyway. And they were all going back to headquarters, and I'd kind of gone native, having my own freedom in Asia.
Did you have family at that point?
Yes, yeah. My daughters were born in Singapore.
Wow, what a great education there too for the family to see that. And so, did you get tired of drinking Pepsi and eating Fritos? So that you went to Del Monte?
I didn't go to Del Monte immediately. I did a couple of things in between. I ran a beverage technology company for a while. I ran what was at that time the biggest consumer products logistics company in Asia. And then I was asked to join the board of Del Monte Pacific, which was it was listed in Singapore, and Del Monte had been broken up by KKR
Mm-hmm.
in the RJR Nabisco, breakup. And so they really didn't do anything with any of the other businesses, but they took Del Monte and they cut it into a bunch of pieces. So the smallest piece almost was a company called Del Monte Pacific, which was about a $200 million business that had, some interesting assets. They owned the largest pineapple plantation in the world in the Philippines, and they owned the Del Monte brand in India, and things like that. So we took that business from 200 million to 500 million, and then we bought the parent company, Del Monte Foods, for $1.7 billion. And that took me to San Francisco. In the beginning, I thought, well, maybe I can stay in Singapore, but there was a lot to do. So
No, it's pretty fascinating. Moving ahead a tiny bit, our firm is all about talent, leadership, and impact, and using tech to support it. Did you find yourself moving into sustainable ag? And just to round up some things here, you founded the Huawei Foundation, Perfect Earth Foods, and Hill Tribe Organics. All three thriving. But first, how did you choose Thailand, and what led you to those companies and to just to be in that sector?
So the Del Monte acquisition was 2013, 2014. But in 2011, I was living in Singapore, and I'm a member of YPO, and I was on the regional board of YPO, and I had the portfolio of young adults, which is a kind of a passion of mine. And I started a program in 2011 targeting kind of young adults, young working adults, about social entrepreneurship. It was something that I knew was of interest, to young people. And we had an academy. I sort of shortlisted 12 people in their 20s from all over the world. And we had an academy in Singapore where we brought together some of the leading social entrepreneurs in Asia. And then that was like 2 weeks of just meeting, leading social entrepreneurs. And then the main program was to go to Thailand
Mm.
and spend the summer in Thailand. And the project was called Catapult, to build a working business model that could catapult a village out of poverty. And I knew a guy named Michai Veravidya, who was one of the leading social entrepreneurs in the world, who was on the cover of Time magazine. He's the guy that solved the AIDS crisis in Thailand, and then
Wow.
went on to do all kinds of interesting things, among which was he developed a really cool school in rural Thailand, built entirely of bamboo with very interesting, innovative sort of education system. But he also had teachers in quarters. So because I had these young people and I needed to put them somewhere where they could, start working on some of these projects, but not be, at risk. I had families to answer to, like, okay, where's my son and daughter? So that's really kind of Thailand, and Michai's school was a great foundation, and he had a lot of entrees into villages, and gave us a very good platform. So that's how we started there, and that program ran for the summer, and they were broken into teams of 4, so there were 3 teams, and they built 3 interesting social enterprise models. I think all of which had promise. At the end of the summer, we had a Shark Tank kind of thing with YPRs, sort of, they were defending their projects, and that was an exciting end. And then they went back to their lives around the world. 2 of them got married, but about a month later, or the next sort of 30 days, I started thinking about this thing that I had done, and I felt like actually I should not have done it, because the villages had been kind of wound up with the possibility of what these ventures might do for them. And these guys were gone, and they had set up a working model, but realistically there was nobody to drive it forward.
Mm.
So in a way, I think I tricked myself into a topic that I was interested in, and forced myself to start getting directly involved. So I decided not to run that program again, and to take the most promising project and make a business out of it. So I said, I can't run all 3 of them, but I'll take one of them.
So was that one Hill Tribe?
Became Hill Tribe Organics. So the idea they had been working on was free range chickens. I changed it to free range eggs because I didn't want to be slaughtering chickens. And then partnered with the guy who had been working on this Catapult project together with me, and then a Thai YPOer who was the largest producer of organic rice in Thailand. And he had a operations base in the north, in Chiang Rai. So that's how Hill Tribe Organics was started, with a model, this valley where we began. And we went there simply because the guy with the rice business, the first Hill Tribe college graduate from that valley, was working for him. So he thought, that's kind of cool. So thought, whoever was the first college graduate from the valley will go to his village and meet with the elders in his village and start there. And we chose organic eggs. Eggs are a big market in Thailand.
Hmm.
And then free range, just because of animal welfare. And so we were the first organic egg in Thailand, the first free range egg in Thailand. There weren't even cage free eggs in Thailand. So we and that was part of our model was to take a large category, innovate in a large category, and so an innovation in a large category could potentially develop a business large enough that it could sustain itself.
Would that be for
And
local market or beyond?
so we started in the local market and mainly focused on the consumer and using branded marketing rather than sort of a B2B system, because we believe that the reason this village was dying, the original impetus was a photograph of one of the villages. And I looked at that photograph and I kept looking at it and I went, where are the young people in this village?
Hmm.
And the answer was there aren't any. They've all left. The children long ago saw that their parents, were extremely poor and they saw no hope. So this village was going to die. The valley was going to die
Well,
in a matter of years. They were
mhm.
farmers in their 70s, et cetera. So Hill Tribe Organics was started with a perspective that, yes, it's a social enterprise, but it has to be extremely high impact, because this sort of a small change won't create the level of change that we need. So we needed to have a big impact. So we set the model to double family income. And so we gave every family 700 hens for free, and we contracted with other families to grow corn and other feed components, and we provided the feed for free. And then we agreed to buy all of the eggs, regardless of size, and also to keep it simple. So the only investment the farmer had to make was to build a hen house and a enclosure to rye, which is 0.8 of an acre. So they had to identify a piece of land that we would approve and then build a hen house and an enclosure to our specifications. And then we give them the hens and give them the feed and gave them the hens at 16 weeks of age. So the hens were just starting to lay eggs. So within 3 months of beginning, the farmer would start to bring in income that was, roughly twice or more what they had known before. And mostly they had been doing some kind of farming project. And increasingly, what we realized is that the huge difference for people was daily income, that farmers don't have daily income. And so they weren't educating their children, even though
Hmm.
school was free. Theoretically, it wasn't free to them because they had to buy books and transport them and pay for their meals. So the first thing Hill Tribe Organics farmers did was to start to educate their children. And then most of them were also women. So we didn't design the model for women initially, but it has become a source of economic independence for women.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, especially since we've spent a lot of time on women's leadership and giving them opportunity. How did Perfect Foods and the Huawei Foundation fit into the model?
So as I mentioned, one of my co-founders uh, is the largest organic rice producer. So we set up a business to do value-added products, consumer products
Hmm.
out of rice. So we started with pad thai noodles and then ramen noodles and now rice cakes and rice crackers. We brought chia from Peru 10 years ago. So we're the only producer of organic chia, and we sell, noodles and crackers and rice cakes and chia seeds all over the world.
Hmm.
HTO, Heal Tribe Organics, was really a locally focused business. And we built a significant brand franchise in Thailand, and Perfect Earth Foods was largely a global business. And our first customers were US, and now we have customers all over the world. So quite different businesses.
Not bad from you know, hating a banking job to somehow evolving into sustainable ag and actually making a big difference for community and healthy food and stuff like that. And I guess it, not to be cute, it kind of grew on you that this is where you were supposed to be, huh?
Yeah, you know what? I have to say that I felt different.
Yeah.
Actually, last week I got a photograph that said this picture was taken 13 years ago. That's when we started Hill Tribe Organics, and there was actually a picture of my middle daughter who was there when we started, um, and that was um, 2 years after after the Catapult project. So it's been about 15 years, but um, I have to say I have felt more focused, more peaceful, um, since I began this journey, which I guess I had secretly wanted to do. Um, I left Del Monte in 2014 and then started, working, full time on these companies. And I was CEO of both Hill Tribe Organics and Perfect Earth Foods for a while, and then we brought in a CEO for Perfect Earth Foods, so it's now I'm focused on Hill Tribe Organics. I still do a number of things for Perfect Earth Foods, but that's my focus. And then the Wawi Valley Foundation we started, I guess it was 3 years ago, and even though we have been very successful in Hill Tribe Organics, we're the dominant number one organic egg, the dominant free range egg, still I think the only organic and free range egg in Thailand. And
Hmm.
you go in the supermarkets, you'll see, the bulk of the category is Hill Tribe Organics. Nevertheless, the number of families that we are impacting in the Wawi Valley was still a fraction of the total families. So I've been thinking for years about what to do to diversify and expand so that we could impact the entire valley and create a model that could be used and replicated in other valleys. And so while organic agriculture was a big thing, 13 years ago in Thailand, I don't think there was a single domestic business that was focused on organic agriculture. So that was news at that time, but over the ensuing period, it's very clear that global warming is having a major impact on us and will even more so in the future. And so organic stops doing the bad stuff, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Right.
So for the last probably 7 years, I've been thinking that we need to evolve, to the next level. And in agriculture terms, it's regenerative organic agriculture.
Hmm.
But it took me some time to sort of think through um, how to do that, um, what kind of model. And about 3 years ago, it, the sort of vision sort of crystallized to set the objective of converting the Wawi Valley to regenerative organic agriculture. And further, to do that by growing the healthiest foods in the world in the healthiest way. So the healthiest way is regenerative organic agriculture. The key, though, for this valley project, and the Wabi Valley is not small, it's 100,000 acres,
Well,
5,000 families. But what we did right with Hill Tribe Organics is we started with the market. And a lot of the experience that I had at Pepsi with Frito-Lay, which was really my first experience with agriculture, potatoes and corn. And then Del Monte was all about agriculture. And I saw that farmers are poor because they're the end of the value chain, and the value chain is long. And
it's too long.
6 or 7 layers in the value chain, and the last person with no bargaining power is a farmer. And then you add to that Hill Tribe people who are socially marginalized. And so, it's like you're really at the bottom of the chain. And
Mhm.
farmers are not lazy. They're acutely aware that they're poor. They want to educate their families and take care of their families. And so they often do things in order to help their families that don't work out, not because they're stupid. It's because they just don't understand the market factors involved, and they don't have any leverage, and they don't have any connections. So they will say the price of pineapple isn't good, but tapioca is really going up. Let's get into tapioca. Then they talk to their friends. They go, "That's a good idea." By the time they all get into tapioca, now the supply of tapioca rises and the price falls, and the price of pineapple is double what it was when they decided to get out of it. So what was clear to me from my experience was that we could help the farmers with that whole exercise. And if we took a branded platform, developed a branded platform, so we're not subject to the whim of some buyer who might all of a sudden decide, I found a better deal, and so everything we built, could collapse in an afternoon. But if you build a consumer business, it's nowhere near so vulnerable. So we started by choosing eggs, as I said, but to do branded eggs and to build a brand platform that would not only make us the branded leader, but would provide a platform that would enable us to diversify. So if Hill Tribe Organics wants to come, and develop coffee, for instance, as we ultimately will, consumers would be receptive to that. So the regenerative organic valley principles are now actually to create a global branded platform. To create a global branded platform, we need shelf-stable products. So our ability to grow was limited by the fact it was fresh produce. And, we were just in Thailand. Before COVID, we actually were exporting. Then COVID came and the government shut down all exports. So we went back to Thailand. And just now we have been approved by the Singapore government to export our eggs to Singapore, but it's still, the universe for fresh produce is limited.
Yeah,
But
that's
if
true.
we're looking at now what we say, we'll produce the healthiest foods in the world in the healthiest way, the list is is relatively obvious. It's those foods that have been proven to be healthy for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We're not kind of going, oh, we have this new health food. No, we're choosing things that are proven. So yes, eggs and coffee and cacao and moringa and turmeric and ginger, and products, like that. And then those are products that can be processed into shelf-stable products, which can be sold around the world. And the portfolio of products will enable us not only to make single products like coffee, et cetera, or we can also make more complicated products, complex products, using that sort of portfolio of ingredients, to make wellness products, for instance, that are a combination of, turmeric, ginger, moringa, et cetera.
Pretty amazing. Sounds like you learned a lot along the way too, as you went through that entrepreneurial journey. I work with a lot of food related companies, healthy food, and obviously there's a big push for quote unquote healthy food, but also a big push for growing local, and even growing in your own home, vertical growing in your own home and things like that, which I would hope would be a plus for people that are producing healthy food. But one thing I'll have to say is, in LA, we always say keep them wanting more so we can do a sequel. I think we may have to do a sequel on this thing. But I do have one more question on this part I want to ask you, and that's with all your experiences, with going through the pandemic, with going through, we're already now in 2025, which is amazing. I had a client in 2021 told me that he felt the year 2020 flew by slowly. And I thought that was like a pretty interesting line. And today, even people look at 2020 like it was yesterday and years ago, almost at the same time. It's a weird feeling. So with all that said, can you share maybe what you're most grateful for and what you're most hopeful for?
Well, I have a lot to be grateful for. Yeah, I was fortunate to have great parents um, and family, and I think that's probably at the most basic level what I'm most grateful for. I have a great wife and children, and I've had a lot of experiences and a lot of opportunities that were special and unique, and I'm grateful for all of those things.
What are you most hopeful for?
So the world is increasingly at odds. People used to say world peace, right? Like I just hope that somehow people start having conversations with each other. I'm hopeful about community. I moved here for community. I think the most essential element of life is community. Hill Tribe Organics is about revitalizing communities.
Right.
I don't want to make some people rich, et cetera. It's not that. It's to make as many people as possible able to live a decent life and to work together and to enjoy each other. So
I think that's that's a big play. I think that that's something that people crave is community. In fact, really quick, I don't know if you're familiar with Blue Zones at all. And Dan came away from that saying the thing that fills your heart and soul more than anything is belonging. The food, the diet, the exercise, whatnot, all that's important, but belonging was the thing that
the
fills people's
highest
heart.
correlating factor in the Blue Zones is community.
Yeah.
And caring about your neighbor is just, or knowing your neighbor cares about you, is
Trusting him enough to give him a key to the house.
all of those things. So when you look at those blue zones. That's what it is. It's not yogurt or, you know,
Well, it could be a little yogurt.
people used to say
Um,
that.
so I'm grateful for having a new friend. That's what I'm grateful for, and that you are a leader who cares. And in a great way, I think that's what I'm hopeful for too, that we have more leaders who care and doing projects and initiatives and companies like this that make a difference. So thanks for being that, and thanks for being on the series.
Yeah, great. Mark, thank you.